Good evening and a very warm welcome to this edition of Public Forum. Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi today launched the 3 new schemes aimed at transforming urban India: Smart Cities Mission, Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation, and Housing for All, with the objective to improve life in cities. The idea is not only to equip the cities with better facilities, but also make them livable for the majority of population, reduce urban congestion and provide affordable housing to all. Though there has been no dearth of schemes in the past to address these issues, but the NDA government at the centre views the urban expanse as both a challenge and an opportunity, and believes in changing the story of urban growth. We discuss the government's plans to transform Indian cities and the challenges ahead in today's edition of Public Forum. And my guests today are Mr. Shubhagato Dasgupta, I'm so sorry, who's a Senior Fellow, Centre for Policy Research, Professor Kawas Kaparia, former Dean, School of Planning and Architecture and Urban Planner, Dr. Amitabh Kundu from the Delhi Policy Group. We'll start the discussion, but first, let's take a look at what the Prime Minister and the Urban Development Minister said today while launching these 3 new schemes.
भारत जिस तेजी से अर्बनाइज हो रहा है, एक प्रकार से यूरोप के किसी छोटा देश देखें तो हिंदुस्तान में हर वर्ष एक नया देश जन्म लेता है शहरों में। मतलब हमारे सामने कितनी बड़ी चुनौती है। उस चुनौती को पार करने के लिए हमने निश्चित योजनाओं के साथ आगे बढ़ना पड़ेगा। जो स्मार्ट सिटी का कंसेप्ट है, उन स्मार्ट सिटी जो बनेगी, ये पहली बार स्मार्ट सिटी की योजना ऐसी है कि जिसमें शहरों का निर्णय भारत सरकार नहीं करेगी। शहरों को स्मार्ट बनाने का निर्णय राज्य सरकार नहीं करेगी। शहरों को स्मार्ट बनाने का निर्णय वो शहर का नेतृत्व, वो शहर के नागरिक, वो शहर के म्युनिसिपैलिटी के लोग तय करेंगे।
Smart City Mission intends to promote reliable public transport, non-motorized transport like walking and cycling, e-governance, good water supply, and assured power supply, accountability through citizens' participation. This also benefits the urban poor the most. It is because the present haphazard and unplanned urbanization is serving the car-owning and rich classes more than the poor.
So there will be basic facilities of 24/7 water and electricity supply, along with better transportation and better, as we said, livable conditions in the new cities. And more importantly, the power largely would be in the hands of the ULBs. Is that really going to be a reality? Dr. Kundu, I'd like to start with you. Do you think that the most pressing issues of urban planning and urban development have been addressed today by talking about the urban local bodies and the empowerment of those local bodies in the decision making regarding how the smart cities and which all smart cities should be developed in this country?
No, Shalini ji, I must say that I was very happy today, because there has been some discussion about what would be the concrete shape of the smart cities, right, and also the Amrit, what are the key components. And some people talk that smart cities is just a technological phenomena. Some people say that it really means cyberspace and computer-based provision of services, high quality infrastructure, high quality basic services. But I think today the emphasis was not really on the digital technology or computer-based delivery system. Prime Minister didn't mention about that. He did emphasize the need for the basic services, water supply, sewage, sanitation, and electricity. I think certainly a city cannot be a smart city unless the basic provisions are being made, and they have to be delivered efficiently. Why I was very happy about the Prime Minister, giving a very smart definition of the smart city. He said a smart city should be able to anticipate what are the changes coming up and how the people would require different services.
Right.
And I would just like to mention that if you look at the data from National Sample Survey, in the period of just 4 years, we do find that the percentage of households that have access to tap water, plus you add the bottled water also, because that's coming
That
up,
has increased.
has gone down.
Has gone down.
77% was covered, now it is 74%. So 3% decline in a period of 4 years. Similarly, if you take the households which are drawing water in the urban areas beyond 200 meters, that percentage has gone up from 2% to 5%. Percentage of households which do not have any kind of a sewerage, solid waste disposal system has gone up from 18% to 24%.
24%.
So I think I was very happy that the Prime Minister did talk about the basic amenities. That should be the core of any urban development intervention. And certainly smart cities and Amrut should be able to address that.
Okay. Mr. Dasgupta, is it a very convincing plan which has been presented, and do you think that the deliberations that are now going to take place on all these three put together would certainly change the way things are about urban India? Because there are certainly a number of problems, right from congestion to proper planning to transportation and housing, which are going to be addressed now.
I'd like to start by saying that I guess this, the way I read it, is a new urban strategy because in the past, through JNURM, the focus on urban infrastructure and urban development got a lot of momentum, and it was due in its time. It was, like most of us think, slightly late in the day, but the emphasis on urban development got a place in national policy. And it was at a time when the state governments were not very active in urban policy itself. And the JNURM kind of pushed state governments and cities to look at urban policy for themselves. In this new urban strategy, the way it's been presented to the nation tries to put local governments in front, trying to put across an argument that they will have to lead the process, and the state and the central government will be in a supporting role. That is a welcome start. But means it also is very interesting because in JNURM, essentially what happened was that there were a set of standard reforms that states and cities, not necessarily, means across all parts of the country, were to implement a set of very similar reforms. Actually, the list was the same for all. In this new urban strategy, what I seem to notice is that there is a bunch of resources being available through programs like the Swachh Bharat Mission, which is applicable to all cities. Then there is a kind of reform-based exercise, which is the Amrut, which is for the 500 large cities which need to reform too, and orient them more towards more commercial sources of finance. And then there's a competition above that, which kind of encourages cities, incentivizes cities to take on newer and more progressive challenges. This being said, so in one sense it does recognize some differentiation beyond what JNURM did across different cities of different natures.
Right. And we'll have to certainly go back to see as to how the JNURM also performed. And now, since we know that this is going to be merged with the Amrut, so it has to be seen as to what really happens to those number of pending projects too under the JNURM. We'll talk about that, Mr. Dasgupta. Professor Kapadia, the identification of cities, whether it's the Amrut cities or the smart cities, do you think that's a very key aspect of this new exercise?
Well, the identification of cities is merely a formality because, as we all know, most Indian cities are, struggling to provide that quality of life that the Prime Minister talked about. And I think it's high time that it is beginning to be understood that this quality of life is not something that the government can provide. Because city after city, if you look, you find that in terms of the provision of basic services, they have failed. I mean, the failure rate has been from miserable to bad. There are hardly any cities which you can say are really providing you a quality of life which is worth living in. So how you elect or select these cities is not the basic issue. The basic issue is that the understanding of smart cities like JNURM before that and Amrut and now smart city is being seen in a different perspective, And the policy makers are beginning to feel that, listen, this is a problem where the citizens have got to get together, where the local bodies have to play a role, and perhaps even the private players have to come in and do their bit and try and achieve, which as of today appear to be formidable challenges. 24 hours electricity, 24 hours water, clean cities, garbage disposal, water supply,
sewage treatment.
I mean, each one of these is a challenge in itself. So, well, I think it's a good beginning, in the sense that if nothing else, this is going to make a whole lot of urban India aware of the problems that would constitute. I mean, there are several factors, and we will talk about them as we go about. But I believe this is a good beginning.
Okay, Dr. Kundu, is identification a key aspect, since much of it would rest with how the states are going to identify the places and how the local bodies, because their role, it's easy to say that they will have a much larger role, but we know the conditions in which the ULBs operate in our country.
Shalini, I entirely share your concern, and there perhaps I have a slightly different take from Professor Kapadia. Out of 8,000 urban centers, if you are selecting 500 under Amrut and 100 under smart cities, obviously there will be sense of deprivation for those cities which are not being picked up. But one can say that, well, look, you can't take everything together. But one issue is that we have 3,000 new census towns which have been identified in 2011 census. And they are not statutory towns. They are by definition excluded, but whereas the census towns, which have really come up on their own in terms of workforce diversification, some manufacturing services, they are in a absolutely, bad condition. Census Registrar General has mentioned that these small towns are almost like total slums. So that is one thing that I think the government will have to address under a certain program. But nonetheless, selection of this town, and we are talking about city challenge competition, I'm not very clear about it, because the number of towns have been already specified according to this, for different states. So what will be the scope of this competition? The scope could be perhaps that the states give a larger number of towns lists and gives to this city challenge competition committee, and then selection is made. Or maybe the competition will be which 20 will be selected in the first year. That much I can understand. But if the number of cities to be selected for each state and the union territories have been decided on some exogenous consideration and population and number of urban centers, I think the city challenge competition idea would be very, very limited. But one thing I must tell you, we have been talking about autonomy, empowerment of the local bodies. But we have been hearing that the external committee with a philanthrope group would come in and perhaps talk about, make the final selection. I was hearing that in Brussels, in the next meeting, the European Union will be discussing with the government of India about the panel and some of the parameters for selection. I would think that certainly this committee should be empowered, and they should have the regional consideration, internal consideration, and we should try to make the urban local bodies as autonomous as possible.
But is it going to be that easy? Because after all, there's funds involved, there's politics involved, there's a functioning, the overall, the operational problems that the local bodies face, all that is involved. Let's just focus on that aspect and see how feasible it would be.
In my opinion, one, I would say that the Prime Minister did mention that this is the first time that such a competition will be run. But we've had some small examples of this. Andhra Pradesh had a small city challenge fund scheme. The national government in 2003 had announced one, which did not fructify. But the concerns around selection in a federal system like India is that most of the calls are already taken. So it's not really free, open competition. And a bunch of the criteria have been laid out. And they rely also significantly on the service level benchmarks and the progress made under the earlier programs, including JNORM. And what we saw in JNORM was that the cities that started off as good cities continued to remain good cities in spite of the reform and project exercise. So means it's not really an open competition, and with the politics involved, obviously means a state government cannot ignore its capital. That itself takes away 30 cities. The states have a quota, and means it is quite a predefined set of cities that you're still working with. But interestingly, the idea has some merit, and the targets for some of these cities might be higher. But I would say that I think it could have been more ambitious in terms of the selection exercise. The biggest concern that I have is that means ab initio, the Prime Minister and the Minister mentioned a lot about local governments driving the process, and that 500 mayors are in the city today and they are to be the most responsive to this. But frankly, mayors have a very small role in urban development in India. And ab initio, I would have imagined that devolution of powers and longer term mayorship should have been an entry criteria for anything, a competition of this
But
nature.
do you see reflections of that kind of change now happening, since this has in fact come to the center stage, where this is one of the big ambitious projects of this government? So let's face it, if the Prime Minister on a platform like that says something about strengthening the local bodies, do you think it's there on the anvil now?
Means yes and no, but to understand how cities actually work, means most of the services that are part of the projects that will be funded out of this are driven by state level agencies.
Right.
And the mayor really being being a one-year post in most cases, which really has no ownership of any of these or any leverage over any of these services. So empowering the mayor and the city political system should means I would have been much happier if that challenge would have been taken on.
Okay, fine. Professor Kapadia, just taking this point forward, do you see budget is going to be one of the crucial constraints? We'll talk about the overall budget which has been sanctioned for the three.
Certainly.
But
I think that so much of money to be spent in a limited time frame in the next few years, there is an absolute need to put your house in order. And these concerns that Mr. Dasgupta talked about, the role of the mayor, the role of the urban local bodies, the powers, the functions, and their capacity to spend so much money in a transparent and a clear manner.
Absolutely.
And reach somewhere, anywhere near these objectives in a predefined time frame.
Right.
These themselves should go a long way in strengthening some of these local bodies, which so far have not really been in the center stage.
Right.
But I guess one of the advantages of the Prime Minister and the union ministers playing up this whole idea is that it's time to empower the local level of action.
That's right. Okay, fine. We'll take a very quick break now in Public Forum on that note, and after the break we'll talk about some other related aspects too, especially the one relating to housing for all by 2022. Welcome back. In Public Forum today, we are talking about the new schemes announced in order to transform the urban India. Dr. Kundu, one of the key phrases which the Prime Minister has used time and again is that everybody should have a house of their own when they migrate or when they come to, stay in a city. So that's where the target, that is to construct about 2 crore houses in the next 7 years, has been projected in the Housing for All by 2022. A large amount of that share of budget, the money in fact, has gone to this project, 3 lakh crores to be spent in the next 7 years. But you may be in a position to explain it better to us, if it is sufficient, and is it a very practical target?
No, I must say that you talked about